Hi there, Tanner. Tanner Hassan-HIcks. Thank you for being in conversation with me. Hyacinth Fraser at Property in Action. Tanner, just talk to us a bit about what it is that you do. I know you're on a property journey, been on it for a while. Just talk us through that.
Yeah, well, pleasure to be here, Hyacinth. So, thank you for asking me on to share my journey and what I've got to speak to you today about. Briefly, I suppose, I've been investing in property since I bought my first property in 2010, a flat in London, and have been sort of opened my eyes to the world and the possibilities of property investing. And ever since then, just been buying more, investing more in property up to where I am today. So I'm fortunate to have a nice little portfolio of properties, a mix of single lets, HMOs as well. And I'm now moved into development. So I'm doing some development projects at the moment. I've got a few live things on the go. I'm actually due to exchange on a commercial property today. Mm-hmm. So lots of fingers, lots of pies, which is great. So now I get to enjoy my time and have conversations like this with you. So
fantastic. One of the things that I know you've been talking about recently is key steps to financial health, and really just the importance of getting the basics right. Do you want to just talk us through some of your strategies around that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've been doing obviously property for a number of years now, and I've been coaching and mentoring and guiding a number of people for a few years as well. And one of the most fundamental things, the biggest thing that I have found during the course of that sort of process is that it surprises me how many people actually don't understand the figures or don't have a grasp of perhaps their own personal finances before trying to invest in property. It does surprise me actually, the number of people, and so something that I try and sort of advocate now a lot is that that's the first place to start. So if anyone wants to grow wealth or invest in anything, whether they be property or any kind of investing, whether it be on the stock market or anything, that is a numbers game. Ultimately, it's all about the numbers. If the numbers work, you'll make returns, and it's understanding that which is absolutely crucial. However, like I said, a lot of people don't even have control of their own finances on a personal level. So what I sort of try and say is actually that's where we need to start. We need to start there, really take control of our own personal finances, understand how those numbers work, and then we can sort of use that as the foundation to sort of push forward and then understand and get more complicated with the investments and stuff. So
just break it down a little bit about what you mean when you talk about understanding the numbers, understanding our finances. What's that mean?
So, I mean, I think it's something that we're never taught. I don't think at schools, for example, we're never taught how money works, or we're never taught how to really, have a bank account and deal and manage our money. So what I mean by that is, are things like just the simple daily budgeting, cost control, managing that money on a monthly basis. Incomes, outgoings equals net. Understanding what our net wealth is and net worth is. So actually, what we're actually worth as individuals. And so, it's a number of these sort of things which kind of gives us the starting point really to sort of then say, okay, well, this is where I am right now. I understand where I am right now. Now I can set myself a number of goals to start pushing forward and growing from that, and using that as the benchmark to track my growth and understand actually how that money is growing throughout time and in what speed, things like that.
So in practical terms, we're talking about people doing a list of their income, a list of their expenses. So in a real kind of practical way, we're saying people need to really just sit down and just figure out, where their money is going and where it's coming in from.
Basically, yeah. So what I've done is I've sort of pulled together I'm in the process actually now as we speak, and obviously when people watch this in the future, perhaps it will already be ready. But certainly at the moment, I'm pulling together a lot of information and blogs and content around this subject, around money management, around better control over our finances, health, wealth, for example, business, investing. And one of the things I've pulled together is what I'm calling my 7 steps to good financial health.
Yes.
So I think having good financial health is so important, not only from obviously from our personal finance perspective to grow our wealth, etc., but from a mental perspective. I think, there's been a number of surveys that have been done across the country for a number of years that have basically all said the same thing, which is pretty much so many people we live in a world where so many people are stressed. I think one of them was something like 85% of the people in the UK say that they're stressed or suffer from stress at one point in their life, which I think is absolutely true. I've suffered from that. The most important, the biggest factor to the cause of that stress is money, and not of feeling, that you haven't got enough money or out of control with your finances. And so I think it's a really important issue to sort of basically take that control back. And that is, we can do a number of sort of simple things to learn about and then start taking that control over time. So these 7 steps, basically, that I pulled together, again, it's not rocket science or I haven't created a whole new concept here. There's obviously a lot of information around on the internet that you can go to and find this, but I've just sort of compiled them down into 7 steps. So, so step number 1 is effectively knowing your numbers. So it's basically the maths, the basic ins less out equals net. So we can do that, and we need to firstly do that exercise to establish where our starting point is, which is I've alluded to already. So we need to establish basically what our net worth is. So we establish that by listing out all of our assets. So things that have value, things like our house or properties, contents within the house has got a value. Vehicles, if you're in a vehicle, will have value. So you list out all those assets on one side, add them all up, and then we list out all of our liabilities on the other side. So things like the debt that we owe. So if we own a property like where I'm sat right now, it has a mortgage on it. So that would be a liability. So we'd list that out as the liability against that asset. So if you've got more than one property, like I have, I've got several mortgages, which I would list out. If you've got credit card debt, for example, or student loan debt, that would be a liability. So something that you owe ultimately, or you need to pay back. So our net worth figure then becomes our assets, the sum of our assets, less our liabilities, and that's our net worth. And that's where we currently stand right now financially in terms of our wealth.
And the importance of knowing that is what?
Sorry?
The importance of knowing that is what?
Well, first of all, to know whether we are, in debt, ultimately, financially secure. But it gives us, like I said, our starting point. If we're sort of watching this thinking, right, I want to push on, I want to grow, I want to earn more, I want to, build wealth, we know where we're starting from. And it's really important to always know that, because we're able to track progress. We may start going down certain paths, but without any knowledge of how we're performing, we don't know whether that's a path ultimately that's giving us the best results. So we need to know where we start from. Okay. So the first one under that step is knowing your numbers about your net worth, which is assets minus liabilities. But then secondly, and probably if I had to list them, I'd say more importantly, it's understanding what our growth rate is, which is effectively our income, our net income, our cash flow on a monthly basis from a personal level. So we need to know whether we are currently in this day and age growing through positive cash flow, or we're actually spending more than we're earning, and therefore we're declining our net worth figure. Because if we've got our net worth, let's say it starts off at 0 and we're earning a net cash flow of £1,000 a month, then obviously our net our net worth is growing by £1,000 a month because our cash flow is going up. So we obviously want to have that cash flow positive at all times. And you've heard the common thing, cash flow is king, right? So if we're in decline, then that's also what can lead to a lot of stress. So in order to calculate that, we just do income, list out all of our income, list out all of our costs, and then obviously that gives us our net cash flow figure. So that's step one.
Okay.
Step two then is for me is all about then controlling those costs. So I call it cost control. So once we know those figures, so we know our numbers from step one, we can now start analysing those, particularly on the cost side, and controlling those costs better. So we need to analyse them in a lot more detail. So we need to list out every single cost that we have made. I generally do it on a monthly basis, but I think if you're doing this for the first time, I would suggest looking back a good 3 or 4 months on bank statements and receipts if you don't have online banking, for example, and listing everything out, because you may be surprised that you've actually got more cost and things are going out of your bank account that you might not know about. So, things like gym subscriptions or, Netflix or all these sorts of things that we spend on a monthly basis, we may forget about. We just need to make sure that we listed them below. What's our cost for our utilities? What's our cost for our, gas, electric, council tax, etc. Are they stable each month as well? So it's getting an understanding of what they are first.
And that will help us to do... Sorry, Ken, I spoke over you.
That's okay. So what was the question?
And that will help us to do...
To basically understand where we're spending our money. A lot of people, again, like I speak to, they and to be fair to myself on some occasions, in the past, not aware of what we're spending and how quickly we're spending it. It's much easier to spend it, if you agree, than it is to earn it, right? So knowing where we're spending our money is incredibly important.
And that will help us, presumably, to make some choices.
Correct. Yeah, which brings us, in fact, on to step number 3.
Okay.
So step number 3, for me, I've listed out, is then all about understanding the difference between needs and wants. Again, if we're trying to improve our situation, it's very important that we have to therefore prioritise our costs. So knowing the difference between what cost is a need for our life compared to what is a want for our life. So for example, my needs would be things like, roof over my head, food on the table, clothes on my back, some transport, for example, to get around. They're what I would classify as my needs. Everything else would then be a want. So for example, a gym membership, a Netflix subscription, which I've mentioned, for example, already, going out, socializing, they're all wants. If having, again, you could argue having a nicer car is a want over a basic car, which is, I'd argue, is a need. So it's for you as an individual to go away and next to all those costs, but effectively right next to each one of them, because we've itemized them now, whether it was a need or whether it's a want. And then that will visualize for us, actually, okay, we need to start prioritizing the needs. And are there a number of the wants that we could actually get rid of to increase our cash flow, at least in the short term, right? Because if we are looking to grow our wealth and we're looking to invest more and earn more, we need to arguably, potentially, control costs, reduce costs to actually increase that spike that allows us to then save more and invest more, for example. So the prioritization of those costs ultimately is absolutely key. Step number 3.
Okay.
Then step number 4 is all about security. So to feel more in control of your finances and to feel more comfortable about them, we need to build in an element of security. So this is about then understanding, about having setting ourselves an emergency fund. So if we don't have an emergency fund right now, it might be stressful because if something were to go wrong, we don't have anything to fall back on. Yeah. So this is where we would be thinking, okay, how by controlling our costs to increase our cash flow, can we now start saving some of that cash flow and building up an emergency fund, a rainy day fund, or whatever you want to call it, just in case something happened, in case the boiler broke down, or in case we were on holiday and our flights got cancelled, and we had to get home. Having that security is incredibly important. Now, a number of people can quantify that in different ways. A fairly standard thing is to sort of say, okay, well, it should be about the size of 3 to 6 months worth of your costs. So as a general kind of ballpark, but again, it's completely personal to you. I prefer to have a little bit more security in case stuff goes wrong. So my pots are generally a bit larger than that. But again, it depends where you're starting out from.
And I suppose one of the things you touched on at the outset was having a level of security is also about your mental health and mental well-being. So if you've got a level of security, it means that you don't have to worry on those rainy days, presumably.
Exactly, yeah. And the thing is that these concepts are obviously on a personal level also apply when you're investing and you're going and you're growing. I mean, security is incredibly important. And that, the more security you can build into anything in terms of your life and also your business decisions and kind of plans, the more comfortable we are proceeding. And we ultimately are, as human beings, we require security. It makes us comfortable, and again, it also depends on your approach to risk and how comfortable you are being uncomfortable. But ultimately, if you don't have any emergency fund, or you don't have any funds available to fall back on if something went wrong, then it's stressful. I don't think anyone would disagree with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the reality, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. So the more we can build in, the better, basically.
Okay, and so what's your next step?
So that's step number 4. So number 5 is then setting ourselves new budgets. Okay, if we haven't already budgeted before, we now need to set ourselves budgets for how we're going to be spending our money going forward. So we've established where we are. We've established what we're spending out on a regular basis, should I say. We've now identified what those spends are in terms of wants and needs. We understand the concept of having to build in security. And as part of that step, actually, it is also important, as part of that security, is to build in a savings pot that we can actually invest as well. To understand those concepts, we now need to set ourselves budgets around all of those items. So, for example, if our council tax is, say, £100 a month, then that's what we spend. That's fixed. Our budget for that is going to be fixed at £100. We can't reduce that really, unless without getting the complex details, there might be ways around that through whatever. But we're not going to bother that. So £100 is our budget for that. But for example, if our food budget, or the amount that we've been spending on food, maybe at Tesco and Sainsbury's or the like, has been, say, £500 a month, the question is now to you is could you budget at 400 and obviously save yourself that £100 a month? Same with your subscriptions. If you're spending, say, £30 to £50 a month on magazine subscriptions, Netflix, whatever, could you reduce that budget to maybe, say, £20? And so by budgeting all of our costs and assigning new budgets for each item, the whole purpose of the outcome of that exercise is to get our overall spend below what our income is. And if our overall spend, our budget for our spend is still greater than our income, then we've got to rebudget and we've got to relook at cutting more, because ultimately our income currently is going to be fixed. So if we're earning, say, £2,000 to £3,000 a month, let's say it's fairly simple, £2,000 a month, our budgets have got to be less than that. Because as part of our budgeting, we still need to also allow for a budget to go towards our emergency fund and our savings fund for growth, future growth. So that exercise is then incredibly important. And then the way we obviously then go forward, we then want to start tracking that on a regular basis.
Yeah. So we're saying all of these steps are really important. We're not necessarily saying it's always easy, because different circumstances are different. But the goal is, let's make sure we're spending less than we earn. And if perhaps we feel we're not earning enough, perhaps look at how that could be increased as well.
Exactly, yeah. So it's an iterative process, and obviously, in certain most circumstances, it's not easy, no. But this whole process is all about it's taking that control. It's understanding how to control that money, understand how the money works on a personal level, so that we can then apply it also on a business level as well. Because exactly the same concepts are required when you're running a business, right? You know, businesses earn money and they spend money, and ultimately they need to make money. So it's exactly the same. And a property investment, I know obviously we're discussing property, that is the same. You know, it has an income through rent, it has overheads and costs through maintenance and bills, etc. And it has to have an income to create a return. So it's all the same concept ultimately. So it's about understanding those, and doing this on the personal level will enable that to happen.
Okay, lovely. Next step.
So that's number 5. And then number 6, which is arguably my most important one, is then diarising it, because it's good to do it once, but the way we're actually going to ultimately take control is by doing it on a regular basis. And it's absolutely imperative, therefore, that we diarise to ensure that we do it and don't forget about it. It's very easy to sometimes bury your head in the sand about the realities of what's going on, but again, all that can do is create further stress, right? So first step is to obviously go through steps 1 to 5, understand where we currently are, and then step 6 is to then get your diary out now perhaps, and then put in on a monthly basis a 1 to 2 hour slot to go through, and for the next month's worth of costs, update what you spent against your budgets and review what that is, whether you've overspent or underspent. And you'll probably find that you've overspent on some and underspent on others. But ultimately then you might then want to, on the following month, adjust the budget slightly accordingly, to see where you can save that money. But again, it's about control, so we have to do it on a regular basis. I personally, will personally review personal finances on a monthly basis, just as a quick sort of sanity check, make sure we haven't spent anything untoward or bigger than expected. I will then look at my investments every quarter, so I'll see how they're performing, and particularly with the business as well, I'll look into that every quarter. And then every year, I'll then look at everything again on a slightly more detailed level, just to, again, make any more investment decisions. If I've got some funds that have been saved throughout the course of the year, I may look at the size of my emergency fund, the size of my savings pot, and then be able to make some decisions from there. Recalculate net worth, for example, every year.
Okay.
So that's number 6, and it's very important that we do that, because otherwise it's very easy to get on with life and sort of forget about these things. So once we've done that, so once we've done those 6 steps, I believe we're now in control of our finances. I believe we now understand the concept, we understand how it works. We're in control through our budgeting, and we're also checking them on a regular basis. So we're now in control. So step 7 for me is now about setting yourself new goals to grow. Because we've done everything before, we obviously know where we are. We can now set ourselves some goals which are very specific and metric based, because we're working from numbers, and numbers don't lie at the end of the day. So for example, if our net worth from step 1, it was let's say, I don't know, £100,000. Okay. That's our net worth today. And our net income is, say, £1,000 today. So we're slightly growing. We can now set ourselves some goals based on those 2 metrics. So, for example, for me, I always have a goal each year to grow my net worth by a set percentage. So it may be I will grow my net worth by 10% in year one, 10% for the first 5 years, for example. And obviously that ultimately will grow. And through the compounding effect, if we know about the compounding effect, if we grow our net worth by 10% every single month, every single year, in say 20 years time, that 100 grand is going to be worth in the millions, right? So that's one way to be able to start setting some goals. We can start setting some goals about our income. We could say, okay, well, if we're in decline currently, my first goal is to get it level. Yeah. And then my next goal might be to start growing it.
So just talk to us a little bit more, because people watching this will think that, you know, that what you said is really important, and you've laid out a very clear, practical process for increasing financial health. But if someone finds that their, I don't know, income is on the decline, what are your thoughts, suggestions around firstly bringing it level and then making it increase? What are your thoughts around that?
So, I mean, income is obviously the hardest one to, I suppose, increase. So what we need to look at is what's the easiest thing to do. So again, it comes back to those costs. So if we're on a negative, so I suppose, projection with our net income, we need to get our costs under control. And so this is where we need to be incredibly brutal with ourselves to say, right, I don't need a lot of this stuff that I'm spending. So if I'm only earning £1,000 a month, for example, I can only afford to spend £1,000 a month. So I need to change my lifestyle in order to live off that £1,000. And that ultimately, that is what we all have to do. We have to make that sacrifice, because it's much easier to make those costs cutting much easier to cut those costs than it is to grow that income. So that's the first step. However, it's not to say that we can't grow our income. So the next step would then be looking at what are the additional alternative income streams that we could start putting in place. But again, we need to then understand how long it's going to take us to actually implement those. So without having done the first step, we're still going to be spending more than we need to, right? So we need to get those costs level with our income. And then we can start looking at the increase in the income. So again, taking on an additional job, doing a bit, setting up a sideline business. Like, you know, there's a lot of ways to make money nowadays using the internet. And there's loads of things that you can do. You can do contracting with your work, maybe some additional hours, some overtime. You can do some, set up a freelancing business through the likes of people per hour or something if you've got any specific skills. But again, what we have to appreciate is that it won't happen overnight. That does take time to grow. And then as we do that, there are inherently costs associated with that as well. So, you know, or that cost may be your time, for example, but taking on extra work, there will be additional travel, for example. You might have an additional cost, so we've got to factor that in. You might need to market or do some marketing if it's a business that you're setting up. So again, you need to factor that in as well. So, so yeah, to answer your question in a long way, that would be that. But in a short way, it would be looking at the costs first, then looking at what skills we have as an individual to think, okay, well, how can I monetize those skills? Can I offer a service? Can I, you know, can I learn, or do I know about a certain topic enough to be able to maybe teach somebody else or use to create an income stream off of it? So that's
okay. Lovely. So that was nice and clear, really well set out. I know this is an area that you're looking at, or you've been starting to look at it more recently, creating blogs, etc., but your key area of business is around property. And I know, as you mentioned, you know, people come to you for mentoring, coaching, etc. How might people contact you in relation to those broad areas?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Thanks. So basically, property is my main business. I've been doing property full time now since January 2015. So that is my kind of experience. certainly. And this is, like I say, a relatively new thing in terms of wealth. And I'm continuing my learning actually now outside of property, which is why this incredibly interests me. But yeah, so if anyone wants to get in touch, the eagle-eyed we've seen, so Agito Property Group. Okay, so that's my property company, www.agitoproperty.co.uk. You can go through there and obviously see what we're up to and contact me through there. Equally, I've got a personal branding website, which is Hassan-HIcks.co.uk, which you're welcome to visit, or you can just shoot me up on Facebook, the social media platforms. So my full name, Tanner Hassan-HIcks. Yeah, I'd be more than happy to help anyone if they've got any questions. And I think I'm definitely just really happy and keen to help people now along their journey. I think I've struggled for a number of years to learn a lot by myself, and it's only when you start networking and asking people who know the answers, the right questions, that you really you start to get some traction. So more than happy to give back, and I certainly have my fair share along the way. So anytime, more than happy to help.
Fabulous. Thank you, Tanner. That was perfect. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, Hassan. All the best. I'll speak soon. Bye.
Bye.